Hello, and welcome to this OUTLAST Iceberg. I'm not gonna ramble here, because if you're here, you know what icebergs are, and you hopefully know what Outlast is. And if you don't, boy, are you in for a shock. But I will tell you that this iceberg was made by Reddit user Trembling Around, so big credit to them for making it. And yeah, no rambling, let's get into it. Outlast is a psychological horror game released in 2013 and is the first game in the Outlast series. You assume the role of Miles Upshur, an investigative journalist looking into the Murkoff Corporation's activities at the Mount Massive Asylum. Outlast was received positively and was praised for the horror that comes with not being able to fight back. You are not a soldier, you are just a dude, and all you can hope is to run away from your attackers before being murdered. The Outlast Whistleblower DLC came out 8 months after the main game and follows Waylon Parks, a software engineer for Murkoff at Mount Massive who sends Miles Upshur an email telling him to investigate Murkoff's suspicious activities, which kicks off the main game. The DLC then happens both before and after the main game, as Waylon attempts to escape the Mount Massive Asylum. The DLC was received very well, and this all led into the sequel. Outlast 2, a sequel taking place after the events of Outlast, was released in 2017. This time you don't play as an investigative journalist, but as a cameraman, Blake Langerman. Blake and his wife Lynn head into the woods of Arizona where they discover a cult hell-bent on kidnapping Lynn and killing Blake. The game was received well, although some feel like the game strayed from the claustrophobic feelings of the first game. And the last game out currently is The Outlast Trials, released in early access in 2023 and fully coming out in 2024. The Outlast Trials takes place before every other game, being set in the 1960s. In Outlast Trials, you play as a nameless undesirable kidnapped by Murkoff under the pretense of charity. All your possessions are taken, night vision goggles are drilled into your skull, and you get thrown into the Sinjala facility. You must participate in trials presented as a form of therapy. What they're actually doing is brainwashing you into becoming the CIA's next killing machine, as these trials are part of the MK Ultra experiments conducted by the CIA. The Outlast Trials is currently rated as overwhelmingly positive on Steam. Outlast has dating sim tag on Steam. This isn't true anymore, but I wouldn't be surprised if the game had the dating sim tag at some point, as Steam tags can often be messed with. Here's a Payday 2 DLC being marked as hentai. Eddie X Waylon and Miles X Waylon. I looked this up and all I could find was fanfics, so I don't know if this is meant to be a joke. If you want to be serious, Miles and Waylon at least have some sort of likeness to each other, as after Miles becomes the Wall Rider, he lets Waylon live and escape the Mount Massive Asylum. Val is Val/Val's gender debate. Val is a character from Outlast 2. They are the leader of the Heretics, a splinter group from the original Templegate cult. Val's gender has been a debate for years. This is because they possess the characteristics of a woman, body-wise, but not refers to Val with male pronouns. When Red Barrels were asked on Twitter about Val's gender, they only responded with Val is Val. There is evidence that Val might be a male to female transgender person, as when naked it seems like their breasts and vagina are shaped with mud, and no, I can't really show you any of this. Some have also said that they see the remnants of testicles and a penis on Val's nude model, but I honestly couldn't see this. And again, I can't show it. I think Val's gender is purposely left ambiguous and is left up to the player to come to their own conclusions. Jessica was sexually assaulted. Yes, Jessica Gray, Blake's childhood friend, was molested by Father Loudermilch. It is heavily implied in the main game, but there is unused audio that also confirms it. And I recommend that you do not look up the audio. There is a reason it was cut. It is very disturbing. Loudermilch then possibly accidentally killed Jessica by pushing her down the school stairs. Outlast Trials was delayed 3 times. Outlast Trials was actually delayed 2 times, unless you count an early access release as a delay. First set for a 2021 release, delayed to 2022, until again being delayed to 2023 when the early access finally released, with the full game releasing in 2024. Outlast Trials won a Golden Bat Award. At the Horror Game Awards 2023, hosted by Feardemic and IGN, users online could vote on the best horror multiplayer game of 2023. Nominees included titles Evil Dead, Dead Island 2, Demonologist, Sons of the Forest, and The Outlast Trials. The Outlast Trials took the win and won a Golden Bat Award.
For the best friendship-destroying multiplayer horror game, flies to
The Outlast Trials.
Oil-themed gin. Red Barrels partnered with Distillerie du Croix, probably got that correct, to produce an Outlast-themed gin, featuring Sergeant Leland Coyle. Unfortunately, it is only sold in Canada, which sucks because I really want one. You can even mix it into the Whistleblower with its recipe here. I want it so bad. If you live in Canada and are willing to mail booze to me, contact me. I'm not joking, I want it. Console exclusive pre-order bonus. If you pre-ordered Outlast Trials around the time it was releasing on console, you would receive an exclusive Grizzly Hazmat outfit. This wasn't entirely exclusive to consoles though, as early access players on PC would receive it as well. Outlast Easter egg in Outlast 2. In Outlast 2, you can find this carving in a wall reading "Fingers first, then tongue, then balls." This is a reference to the first Outlast game where Tracker cuts off Miles' fingers, talks about cutting off tongues, and then in Whistleblower you almost get your balls cut off. It could also just be a reference to the general process of Tagger usually cutting off people's fingers, then tongue, and then their balls, as well as the actual graffiti saying the same thing in Outlast. Outlast 2 was delayed. Yep, Outlast 2 was also originally delayed, only once this time though. Originally set to release in fall of 2016, the game was pushed to April of 2017 to give the developers more time to finish the game. Outlast Trials is based from Outlast 2. This idea comes from a Red Barrel statement where they said they wanted to make DLC for Outlast 2 but couldn't figure out a way to do it. They then decided to make Outlast Trials a standalone game. This makes sense as Outlast Trials is set in the same general area as Outlast 2, albeit decades before Outlast 2 takes place. It was probably a similar situation to what happened recently with Dying Light the Beast, great game by the way. That game originally started out as DLC for Dying Light 2, but the scope got bigger, so it was released as a standalone game instead. Miles' head model. Miles from Outlast 1 looks like this. You might notice the missing head. Well, there actually is a head model for Miles which is used for shadows and for the end of Whistleblower, and this is what that looks like. As you can see, it's untextured, but you can get the basic idea. The Murkoff account. The Murkoff account is a comic series starring two Murkoff employees, known as the Pauls, who have a task of covering up Murkoff's shady legal issues. The comics mainly focus on linking the first two games together, seeing what happened in between, as well as what happened right after Outlast 2's ending. Lawler stayed in Murkoff for Avellanos. Jameson Lawler is an agent for the CIA who works as a mediator between the CIA and Murkoff in their collaboration with the trials. A. Bradley Avellanos is a high-up at Murkoff. Her role in the company is not entirely clear, but she's obviously important due to her communications with the CIA, Easterman, and even being present in the trials themselves, although in mannequin form. There are a few communications between the two, mostly about operations at the Sinyala facility where the trials take place, but one of these interactions has a romantic overtone. Specifically, the document More Precise Detonation, where Lawler states he had a good time with Avellanos before she points out the room is being recorded, at which point they laugh. Easterman also points this out during one of his mental breakdowns. So the theory is that Lawler lets Murkoff keep operating just for Avellanos. I could see him speaking highly of Murkoff to the CIA, but I doubt one agent could keep the CIA funding coming if there were no results from the trials. Wernicke in Sinyala. Rudolf Wernicke is the lead scientist behind the Wallrider project at the Mount Massive Asylum. Before all that though, he also worked at Sinyala as a dream therapy specialist. He was very interested in the reagents, and as noted by Easterman, only the reagents. He would watch them sleep, take notes, and participate in sleep therapy. He concluded that nightmares and shared dreams would help what Sinyala was trying to accomplish, leading to Project Geister. Geister meaning ghost in German, which added hallucinatory effects to the trials and gave the reagents nightmares. Outlast 2 Adult Diaper Project. To hype up the release of Outlast 2, Red Barrels created a Kickstarter project for Outlast 2 branded adult diapers. If it had met its funding, they would have sold you adult diapers, which they called Underscares, branded with the Outlast 2 logo. Unfortunately, or fortunately, they fell shy of their $28,000 goal, raising just $15,000. The school sequences were reversed. In Outlast 2, at specific points, Blake will hallucinate being in the Christian school he attended as a child. These hallucinations are based on real events, but in reverse, with the first hallucination happening after Jessica's death and the last one moments before Jessica's death. This is fairly obvious just by playing, but in case you wanted hard evidence that these scenes are in reverse order compared to what actually happened, all the clocks go back an hour in each hallucination. Outlast was possibly inspired by Resident Evil. This is true, but honestly any horror game ever made after 1996 took some inspiration from the Resident Evil franchise, as it was and still is a cultural icon. I don't think there are any specific inspirations I can point to. The Resident Evil games most similar to Outlast are actually the post-RE7 titles, which came out after Outlast, not before, suggesting the influence may have gone the other way. Coyle is bisexual. I don't think there is any evidence of this aside from one thing, kind of. Coyle will make sexual comments towards reagents regardless of their gender, which is the only evidence.
People that loiter around these parts tend to get fucked to death.
But he also has clearly homophobic views. You could take this in one of two ways. Coyle is a closeted bisexual with internalized homophobia, or it was simply too much effort to have Cole's AI check whether the current reagent is male or female. Night Hunter is a war veteran. The Night Hunter has 3 lines of dialogue talking about a war they fought in, and the documents on Night Hunters confirm that the Night Hunter population was taken from military volunteers. Gluskin's backstory. Eddie Gluskin is a character you encounter in Outlast Whistleblower. As a child, Eddie was sexually abused by both his father and uncle before they were caught and sentenced to prison. Eddie was too young to understand that what had happened was even wrong, just that it had happened and that it hurt him. Later in life, Eddie developed into a misogynistic serial killer who would kill and mutilate women, most likely due to his unprocessed trauma, which he doesn't even remember having happened. He would then be admitted to Mount Massive Asylum where he would be used in the morphogenic engine. In the game, Eddie wants to capture Waylon and mutilate him by cutting off his penis, in his mind making Waylon a woman, and then killing him as he sees this as some twisted version of marriage. Original Trickster model. I'm fairly certain that Trickster is an early concept of the imposters, and instead of just looking like your player character, they look like this. The third prime asset is Whitehorn. This ended up not being true as the third prime asset was Franco Barbie, but here's what we know about Whitehorn. Whitehorn is a large, grumpy man who possibly in the future will be a prime asset, as he is noted to be as charismatic and insane as Coil and Gooseberry. And that's honestly everything we know about him. He might be an oil baron, as his name is on oil barrels and a bunch of industrial objects in the trials. Okay, update. Whitehorn recently was officially confirmed as scrapped by Red Barrels, so no, he will not be added anytime soon. Outlast has inconsistent lore. The main point of discussion I can find is the question of when Outlast 2 happens. It was agreed that Outlast 2 happened shortly after the original Outlast, i.e. 2013, as the comics seem to line up with that. But then this document found in Outlast 2 causes an issue because it's dated 2015, meaning it can't possibly be 2013. The wiki for this document says it's a mistake by the devs because they apparently said that Outlast 2 takes place shortly after the Mount Massive Asylum incident, which doesn't cite a source, so who knows where that came from. I kinda doubt this claim though, considering Red Barrels is apparently saying Outlast 2 happens in 2017. So does it take place in 2013, 2015, or 2017? Well, we most likely have our answer. It's 2017, as it is the most recent date given by Red Barrels, but it is probably a retcon of either the 2013 or the 2015 date. Billy saw Wernicke as his adoptive dad. In Outlast, when getting to the Walrider lab and meeting Wernicke states that Billy, the host of the Walrider, sees Wernicke as his dad, and believes this is why Billy hasn't killed him yet. Billy never knew his actual father, so after being subjected to the torture of the morphogenic engine and going insane, he most likely internalized Wernicke, his tormentor, as his father as a way to cope. Waylon is Korean. The only evidence of this is that Park is a common Korean last name, and some see Waylon as Korean in his stylization in the comics. That's about it. His race isn't that important to his character, so he might as well be Korean, why not? Outlast Ask Boxes. An Ask Box is a Tumblr thing. I'll explain it in more detail in a later entry, but essentially it's a form of anonymous Q&A where people roleplay as characters from a franchise, and I think you can see why I do not want to open any of these Tumblr links. Outlast 2 won a Steam Award. Outlast 2 did not win a Steam Award. It was nominated for 2017's Mom's Spaghetti Award, which it lost to PUBG. The blood rain is real. In Outlast 2, at one point, it starts to heavily rain blood, and taking this as literal has two different interpretations. The first is that it is raining water, but Blake is just hallucinating the rain as blood. The second is that it is literally raining blood, which would be pretty metal, but no, it is not actually raining blood. Blood rain is a real phenomenon, but I doubt that is what is happening here, as it would be quite a coincidence. Easterman possibly has mother issues. As a child, Easterman was abused by his mother, as proven by some documents, which definitely gave him some issues. It might be why he seems to be creating a sort of messed up family with the prime assets. Oil being the father, Gooseberry as the mother, Franco as the child, the Crest twins as the grandparents, and Lilia as the daughter. Easterman and the prime assets represent the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion in Templegate. This is an interesting theory that comes from a Reddit post arguing that this tetramorph in the Chapel of Templegate is a representation of the prime assets and Easterman in Outlast Trials. It is an interesting read, and I suggest you do, it's linked below, but the problem with this in current year is that we have a bunch more prime assets than when the theory was made. The themes are still interesting, but it would be strange that so many prime assets are ignored for the creation of the tetramorph, although maybe the Chapel predates those characters being introduced into the lore. It was the Walrider who destroyed the radio tower. At the end of Outlast 2, there is a blind flash, moments before Blake goes comatose and the game ends. In the comics, it is revealed that the blinding light came from the radio tower, the one that's been messing with your head and causing hallucinations the entire game, being destroyed by the Walrider, who while controlling a colony of ants. The girl on the van picture is Jessica in Templegate. In Outlast Trials, there is this van that has a depiction of a girl praying, and the entry is implying this is Jessica in Templegate, which, no, Whitehorn model is in the game. Yeah, there is a model of Whitehorn in the game files. Here it is. Easterman is bisexual. This could be true based on your interpretation of some of Easterman's writings. In the document, The Sake of the Future, Easterman talks about Wernicke and notes how he appeared in his dreams, calling him handsome, then hoping he can see his wife soon. He could have some repressed homosexual feelings, but Easterman seems to be more attracted to Wernicke's power and sway more than Wernicke himself. There is another document where Easterman discusses, essentially, deep-throating the Lupara, Franco's gun. He enjoys total control and dominance, and here he finds the power the gun promises. He is totally obsessed with power and control, so it's not that he just likes sucking on a gun imagining it's a dick, he enjoys the feeling of power over people that a gun offers. Nick, Lurd, and Ethan have the same voice actor. Lurd, Nick, and Ethan from Outlast 2 are all voiced by Carlo Mestroni, who also voices Dr. Easterman in the Outlast Trials, so that's pretty neat. Blake's glasses were broken in the promotional image. In this promo image for Outlast 2, you can see Blake's glasses on the ground slightly cracked, which never happens in the actual game. I think it is a bit of a missed opportunity to not have the glasses crack or to lose them for a section, but maybe that idea was cut because when you think about it, it would be kinda annoying to play an entire section without really being able to see. Coil's baton is actually a cattle prod. Coil's stun baton is not actually a stun baton, but is indeed, yes, a cattle prod. This is most likely a nod to a story that Coil can tell where he witnessed a cow getting struck by lightning and catching on fire, with his dad just watching the cow slowly die instead of putting it out of its misery.
Saw a cow struck by lightning once. Kraut Black Angus. Caught fire and screamed like a child. Mama told Daddy to kill it, but he just opened himself a beer and sat down to watch it gallivant and caper. It ain't always a humdrum time in the country.
It could be that Coil's parents were cow ranchers, hence the use of a cattle prod. Pusher is a zoophile. Pusher has a line about wanting to fuck animals if he were a veterinarian.
I guess it's not unheard of for a doctor to have sex with his patients. Maybe I should be a veterinarian.
So yeah, Bull is still the least sexually messed up character in this franchise. Fuck Spen's honeymoon cabin. I looked this up and immediately saw Wayland Park sucking on Eddie Gluskin's Little Eddie, so that was great, thanks for that. Do not look this up, it's just Outlast porn. Also, that page I saw was page 180 something. So, Outlast gave Stranger Things some inspiration. Fair warning, I have not seen Stranger Things, so this is not very in-depth. Not that there seems to be much to discuss anyway. Arguably, the most memorable sections of Outlast 2 are the school flashbacks and the chases within, and it seems like one of those chases was referenced in the very popular TV show Stranger Things. Credit to Creepy Guy on YouTube for showcasing this. We see a little boy running through a school very similar to the one in Outlast 2, and not just that, the walls are covered in the same tendrils as Outlast 2. Here's them side by side. Unfortunately, to ruin this, it does seem like this is a coincidence as most of Stranger Things Season 2 was filmed before Outlast 2 came out. Outlast 2 characters New Year resolution post. I got nothing. This entry was explained by the Iceberg's creator via a Facebook link that is now dead. It was probably some fans making jokey New Year's resolutions for some of the characters. Red Barrels' first AMA. I'm pretty sure this is referring to this Reddit thread, an AMA by Philip Morin, the designer of Outlast. It was held about 2 months after the first Outlast came out, but I'm not sure what the significance of it is. I read all of his answers to the questions, most of them are sincere and insightful, some are humorous, that's about it. David Annapurna was the first whistleblower. David Annapurna was an orderly working at the Mount Massive Asylum. They, unlike most Murkoff employees, had some morals and realized Murkoff was shady. They would request resignation multiple times with no answer from Murkoff, until David threatened to resign and contact the press if Murkoff did not respond. Murkoff responded by sending David to Mount Massive, this time as a patient, claiming he was suffering from persecutorial delusions. This was actually requested by Richard Trager in an email. Trager was supposed to take Miles's balls and tongue. It is implied through this writing on the walls that Trager wants to cut off Miles's fingers, and then if he hadn't managed to escape, his testicles and finally his tongue. 3 blind dreamers. The 3 blind dreamers are one of those things we know pretty much nothing about. They are only mentioned in Outlast Whistleblower, described as physically blind but not unseeing, meaning they probably have some kind of psychic power, possibly due to the morphogenic engine. Murkoff considered the 3 blind dreamers the true reward of the Walrider project, more valuable than the Walrider itself. That's essentially all we know, and they will likely get more focus in Outlast 3. Eddie and Frank are confirmed to be besties. Not quite, but close. In an Ask Red Barrels video, series writer JT Petty answered the question of which 2 variants in Mount Massive are most likely to be best friends, with his answer being Eddie Kluskin and Frank Manera.
I feel like Frank and Eddie would get along pretty well. Like, I think that they would, like, it's one of those relationships where you wouldn't expect them to get along, but then if they met at the right party and things were comfortable enough, I feel like Frank and Eddie would get along really well.
Blake imagined Loudermilch masturbating while chasing him. The demon version of a Loudermilch that chases Blake around the school seems to, at times, be touching itself. And since he does have a fully modeled cock, as is expected from Outlast, I cannot show it to you. Anyways, this works in 2 ways. It foreshadows Loudermilch's perverse nature, and it represents Blake's subconscious repression of what really happened to Jessica, the truth only coming out through the monster-fied version of Loudermilch. Frank Trager and the twins' Halloween costumes. I don't know what this is talking about. There are no official costumes of these characters, or even unofficial ones. A lot of people have cosplays as these characters, but that's about it. Wernicke was a photographer and a cat person. When the Walrider project was revived in 2009 with the reopening of the Mount Massive Asylum under Murkoff's control, Murkoff faked Wernicke's death to keep his research extra secret. The fake obituary made by them says that Wernicke spent some of his last years with a photography hobby and taking care of cats. It could be that this is true and Wernicke loved those things, but it could also be that these details were made up by Murkoff to make Wernicke look good, as the obituary skips all of the bad things Wernicke has done, notably his entire involvement with the Nazi Party during World War II. Unused Miles' voice in Outlast 2. All Outlast protagonists are voiced by the same person. Aside from these guys, these don't count. They are voiced by the very talented Sean Baicho. I fucking love Wrench. While Miles and Waylon aren't very talkative, they do grunt in pain and in other situations. These grunts were reused in Outlast 2 as Blake Langerman is also voiced by Sean, leading some to believe that Miles was actually cut content when data miners found these reused grunts. But no, they were just reused since Sean would be voicing the protagonist again. Outlast 2 used Miles' unused concept for Blake. So, in Outlast, Miles was originally going to be sexually assaulted at some point. We don't know when or by whom, but it was eventually scrapped as they thought it was a bit too excessive. Cut to Outlast 2 and it was no longer excessive as Blake gets raped by Val. In the release version, we don't really see a lot, it's more implied. She does climb up on you and straddles you, but we all know what happened. Apparently this scene was also cut down a little, as a description of an earlier version of this scene was written by the Australian Classification Board. I obviously cannot read you this description, as YouTube probably doesn't like me reading straight up porn to you, but it seems like Blake's objections were a lot more vocal, and Val was seemingly doing a bit more than in the vinyl version. Fan-made variant Waylon. This is talking about how in Whistleblower, Waylon is subjected to the torture of the morphogenic engine, but only through TVs and not the full bubble treatment. From what we can tell, this did not turn Waylon into a variant, as his character model looks normal. So there are a couple of fan-made variant Waylons out there, but after seeing Eddie Kluskin's cock, I am too scared to go down that rabbit hole. Outlast OC Askbox. So, an Askbox is a Tumblr thing. I have never used Tumblr in my life, so I apologize for my ignorance, but it seems to be a sort of anonymous Q&A where people can send a creator questions and they can choose to answer them. Some people roleplay as Outlast characters and answer these questions as that character. Walrider is confirmed to be sentient like Venom. Actually, it's not really like this. Venom is a living and thinking entity that bonds to a host for usually beneficial reasons. The Walrider is not quite like that. The Walrider is a massive collection of nanomachines that needs a human host to bind to in order to become an intelligent being. Since we're already using Marvel terms, Venom is its own creature, while the Walrider is more like Iron Man's suit, an amazing piece of technology, but it needs a human to operate and is a hunk of junk without one. Val was killed by Marta. Val's fate in Outlast 2 is left a bit ambiguous. Their death is heavily implied but never shown. But cut content suggests that originally you would witness and record Marta killing Val. Listen here to Blake's reaction to that.
Val died laughing. If hell's waiting, I don't think Val will mind. There'll be pain there and company, fire to burn the truth away.
On top of that, full animations were data mined from the game showing this scene. Credit to this beautiful fella for showcasing this. It has Val mid-raping Blake and being grabbed by Martha, which I'm skipping just in case, but here's the death scene.
Be still. Stop laughing. Test you. Filthy Val. Shut the fuck up.
Pretty cool. I wonder why it was cut. Maybe they wanted to leave Val's fate open enough to use her in the future if they wish. The Locust is possibly affected by the Wall Rider. There's a section in Outlast 2 where Blake must attempt to cross a shaky bridge. The bridge itself isn't the problem, but a sudden Locust swarm throws Blake off the bridge. So what is the Locust swarm? There are two answers. The first is more obvious. The Locusts are not real, just another one of Blake's hallucinations. This would fit with Blake's other hallucinations that are also biblical, locusts being seen as a sign of divine judgment. The other answer is that they are the Wall Rider. As shown in the comics, the Wall Rider is capable of possessing insects, as it takes control of an entire colony of ants while remaining controllable by either Billy or Miles. It could be that the Wall Rider possessed a locust swarm, although, as a small nitpick, there are no locusts native to North America. This could disprove the locusts being real, or it could just be that in Outlast's universe there are locusts in North America. You can actually edit Outlast notes/documents. In both Outlast games, all the documents are actually stored as plain text inside the game's localization folder, meaning you can easily change them into whatever you want. Outlast 2 antagonists represent the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are symbolic figures in Christianity appearing in the Book of Revelation. They act as a catalyst for the end of the world, basically destroying humanity during the apocalypse. With Outlast 2 heavily referencing the apocalypse, I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. This theory submits that the 4 main antagonists of Outlast 2 represent these horsemen. So let's first discuss the horsemen so we know the basics of what they are, and then discuss how they may tie to the characters in Outlast 2. The first horse is the White Horse, or Conquest. Or in modern readings, Pestilence. We will use the modern version here, although we'll reference the original biblical version later because it is important. He is like a disease bringing humanity down. Next is the Red Horse, or War. This horseman carries a massive sword and represents, well, war and violence. He causes everyone to start killing each other. Then we have the Black Horse, or Famine. He represents a societal imbalance where the rich get to keep living in almost luxury while the poor starve and die. And finally, the Pale Horse, or Death, who is pretty much what you think he is. He is Death. He judges the last survivors, kills them, and sends them to Hades. Now finally, let's talk Outlast 2. As per the theory, the most obvious one to tie to a character is Pestilence, who is represented through Nick and Lard. Pestilence is a disease, or a plague, and the Scald population that Nick and Lard lead are suffering from syphilis that is killing them. Also, the original version of the White Horse carries a bow and arrow. I mean, come on. Next most obvious would be Val, who represents war, as they basically just want to start a war and kill each other. They want to bring about the Antichrist so it can start messing everything up. Martha represents death and death's judgment. She judges heretics and kills them. And the last one, Famine, is Noth. Famine was a representation of an imbalance in society, where the rich would live relatively well while the poor suffer. This can be seen with Noth's use of penicillin. Noth, much like the Scald, who would represent the poor, suffers from syphilis. But he sends his followers out to get penicillin for himself to treat his condition, not giving any to the poor. Clearly an imbalance. This is a really interesting theory, and with the apocalypse being a big piece of Outlast 2, it was probably intended. Female OC was prohibited and lore inaccurate. I have no clue what this is about. OCs are original characters, so I'm guessing this is once again some Tumblr stuff. Maybe people didn't like female OCs because lore-wise there are no women in the massive asylum, as Murkoff's testing caused a lot of side effects in women. I don't know. Nick was supposed to be alive and possibly had a chase sequence with Blake. This is referencing data mined audio from Outlast 2 that had Nick crying over Lard's death. It seems like these two's death scenes were written and rewritten a couple of times. Another version has both of them falling, Nick dying on impact while Lard is trapped under him. Another just has them being overwhelmed by a bunch of the Scald and being killed. The final version seems to be a bit of a combination where the Scald push Nick and Lard to their doom. I can't really find anything about a chase. In all of these concepts, they're not really in any condition to chase you anymore. Shady Petty accidentally used she/her for Val. This comes from a comment on a Reddit post about Trans Visibility Day, where a user claimed that JD Petty used female pronouns for Val. There is no linked statement by JD Petty, nor any confirmation this is true, and it is the only claim of this type I could find. So maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. The claim was made by a moderator of /Outlast, so maybe that counts for something. Frank was a member of Temple Gate. There's a theory that Frank Manera from Whistleblower was a member of Temple Gate. This comes from his tattoo somewhat resembling some Temple Gate symbols. Since Temple Gate was a big Murkoff experiment, it could be that they took some members and threw them into Mount Massive for testing. Waylon is canonically a cool dad. This is probably referring to how in many notes in a Whistleblower, Waylon talks about his motivation to escape being solely to see his wife Lisa and his sons again. In one note even stating that he would rather kill himself than escape if not for his sons. There are 3 Wall Riders. I think this theory is saying that each Wall Rider host is actually its own Wall Rider. There are 3 different Wall Rider hosts in the franchise: Billy Hope, Miles Upshur, and the Colony of Ants. It is commonly assumed that a Wall Rider is more of a collective consciousness of previous hosts, explaining how Billy and Miles, while physically dead, are able to control the Wall Rider, or why the Colony of Ants would even attack Murkoff instead of, well, doing whatever ants do. I don't think there are 3 separate Wall Riders though. The Wall Rider that Billy was controlling ultimately transfers to Miles as its new host after Wernicke shoots Miles, and the same entity carries forward from there. That one Jeremy Blair as Nazi fan art. Yeah, here you go. I don't know, man. No, I am sick of this fan fiction bullshit. Do you know how many of these I've had to read? Do you know how much I've seen that you do not want to see? We're skipping this entry. We're going to the next one. Fuck this. Oh, fuck all of you. I am not showing you this. I didn't even want to see this. It's the twins from Outlast 1 just absolutely fucking right up Miles's while he just fucking... That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I don't have a lot to say here at the end. You know, you know what to do with these videos. You like if you like, you dislike if you dislike, you comment if you got something to say. But I will tell you that I have Twitch that you can watch me on for, you know, if you want for some reason. It's kind of weird of you if you do. Like, really, you want more of this? Really? You see this guy? This guy fucking sucks. I also have a Discord server where essentially just me and the boys flirt with each other. So if you want to be a third wheel to that, again, a bit weird on your part, but come talk to me. You really want to do that? But yeah, see you again in the next year when I stop being lazy. Yeah, bye.
What?